Well, it's 7. We might as well get you going so
Okay.
we don't tie you up. And the folks that are on, I've sent out your introduction to everybody. You know, you've been licensed for a while. He's developed a really nice contest dashboard and using Node-RED. And he's going to talk about a number of different things tonight to entertain us and hopefully educate us a little bit too. So
yeah,
take it away.
Thanks. So at any point, if you got some questions, just, ask them. This is kind of an informal presentation. It's going to be a conglomerate of 3 or 4 actually 3 presentations that I've done. So if I skip over any slides, there are slides that I have deemed that have no value in presenting because either they're redundant or I'm going to talk about them at a later date. And then also, if you go to my YouTube channel, if you go to my website, aa0.com, it'll take you to my YouTube channel. I've got a whole series on Node-RED and some other things on Node-RED, just basic nodes, how do you put stuff together. I've got a whole training series on Node-RED. So if you get stuck, you might want to start there. I'm going to give you some other resources that you can get started with that are on the internet. So feel free to, it's kind of an open discussion. I'm going to just blab and you guys just tell me what you know, what you don't know, and the questions you may have, and how do I advance this? Here we go. All right, so what's Node-RED? It was developed by IBM in 2013. Basically, it was developed for machine-to-machine language, IoT devices. It's built on JavaScript. It's open source. You can download it for free. Again, IoT devices, we've adapted it to ham radio. The people that have programmed it have made comments of, it doesn't have to be just IoT devices, and they're tickled pink that we've adopted it for ham radio. So it basically, you can build web-based dashboards with command and control very easily. I'm not a programmer. I didn't go to school to be a programmer, but I was able to put some stuff together. You'll see how easy it is. One of the big things for DXers and contesters is you can create automations for complex tasks. So just think what you have to do whenever you're sitting in front of your radio and you want to move from 40 meters to 20 meters, CW to SSB, all the steps that you have to change, the buttons you have to hit, you can all automate that with one single click in Node-RED. So just think if you're contesting at 3 o'clock in the morning and you change bands and you look over your amp and you're still on 20 meters and you're like, what is going on? This can automate all of those functions and get you so you're not blowing up equipment or you've got fatigue and you're making mistakes. It's all web browser based, so all the things you do and click and program are in a web browser. Runs on anything: Windows, Macs, Linux, a Raspberry Pi. I run mine on a Raspberry Pi. I know that they're hard to come by, but I suggest if you're going to kind of jump into this with both feet, that you get a Raspberry Pi and you put Node-RED on a Raspberry Pi. It can run in any web browser or smartphone. Some web browsers are a little bit better. Chrome is probably the best. Anything that you can kind of resize your screen, you know how if you go up to the upper right hand corner and you can resize it to like 50, 75, 100%, you can whenever you create dashboards, you'll need to play with that to make it look pretty, but it looks okay on a smartphone. I wouldn't program for a smartphone, but you can control your dashboard with a smartphone. But it runs in any web browser, and also it hides all the boilerplate code. So back in the day, if you wanted to connect to something with TCP, you'd have to write like a TCP IP stack, or you have to make a bunch of calls to programs. Now you just drop a node, a TCP node, and you tell it what IP or port you want to configure it on, and it's done. So it hides all that boilerplate code. So I hit on a lot of these points already. I'm not a programmer. You can program this. If I can do it, you can. If you get stuck, there's a ton of resources out there. I'll show you what resources you can go to. There's all kinds of ready to go flows that are probably already for your radio, your amp, your rotator, your relays. A lot of work has already been put into a lot of the flows. You just import the flows into Node-RED, do some configuration, and you're up and running. So what can Node-RED control? Anything that's got an input or output. So think about the input or output on the back of your amp, your rotator. It integrates with PST rotator. It integrates with N1MM, serial, USB interfaces. So basically anything with an input or output, it can talk to. If you can get data out of it, I guarantee you can put some type of Node-RED configuration and dashboard together. So we've already talked about this slide. Why use Node-RED? So one location to control everything in your shack. So wouldn't it be great if you had one screen that had all of the information about all your radios, all your rotators, all your tuners? I don't know about you, but in my contest station, when I actually physically go down and contest, I've got my radio here and I've got my monitors with N1MM up, but my rotator is way up here. My amp is way over there. So I have to do a lot of turning to get all of those things in sync to make sure that I'm on the right band. I got the right settings, yada, yada. Now I have everything right in front of me on my screen, and I can instantly tell what my systems are doing without my eyes leaving the screens, which is great. And I don't have to, I can keep all of my hands on my home row for my keyboard to contest, and I don't have to configure anything. I have to go over to my mouse and do some mouse stuff, but I can see instantly what's going on without my fingers leaving my home row. Again, one click for automation. Anything that you can automate, anything that the input output, you can control in Node-RED. You can integrate non-ham radio devices. Let's say you've got a on-air light that you want to light up. You want to send out a tweet that you just worked a new multiplier. You can do that. The one really cool thing is you can get a light or there's a lightning flow, but you can get a weather node and put in your zip code, and it will tell you what the weather is coming to your station, what your station is going to experience in an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And then based on that, you can trigger an email or an SMS to come out and say, hey, lightning is 150 miles away. You might want to shut your station down. It also can give you audio and visual alerts for like high values, right? So you might be contesting along, your SWR goes high. You don't know it because you're not looking at your SWR meter or your power output or whatever the case may be. It can announce in your headphones, wherever you've got connected, and visually blink something on the screen to say, hey, my SWR is out of spec. So that's nice. So how does it all work? Probably figure out how this all works, but I'm going to go through it anyway. So you run Node-RED on a computer, on a Raspberry Pi, so it runs 24/7. You configure nodes to connect them together to form the basic logic. You configure a dashboard, so you've got the nodes that are strung together for the logic, and then at the end of flows are typically dashboard nodes that you can put together in a GUI to create the dashboard that you see and you interact with. And there's a dashboard down below here. You can see it's got some red and green buttons here. You've got switches. You've got some gauges here, and another switch to say if it's on or off. So this is kind of a typical dashboard. Here is Dave, WO2X, out in New Jersey. This is his dashboard with Flex Radio. So this is the creme de la creme dashboard that everyone kind of yearns for whenever they're putting together their dashboard. So he's got some flex radio. Can you see my mouse moving over here? Okay, so he's got some flex radio information, just IP, VFO, mode. So this gets all the basic info from the flex radio. Then he's got a power genius where he's got his forward power, his SWR, temperature, harmonic load, gives his fan speed. He's got his tuner genius. You can see he's got some settings here, some his C1, C2, and his L values here. He can switch between radios. He can hit the tune button to actually tune the tuner. He's got this antenna genius, so he's got his 6 antennas here. He can select those. He's got some meters here, so it gives the input voltage, the PA voltage, the fan speed, the PA temp, mic in setting, his rotator. So basically, this is a SVG graphic that is interactive. Basically, you click on the graphic and it turns your rotator. So you can turn it manually. You've got presets over here, 0 north, 50 EU, ZL, Pacific, Hawaii, JA. So he's got some presets here, and but you can just basically click on this map, and it will engage the rotator and turn the rotor to wherever you click on the map. Over here is the power switch. So this is where he turns on and off all his AC devices. So his PC, he's got his amp, his Node-RED server, his 66M, that must be to a power supply. And then some basic information about the Raspberry Pi itself, so or the network. So he's got some pings to the PC, his Raspberry Pi, the internet, and then some green lights to indicate if those devices are up and running, and then, of course, his flex radio interface. So here are some other dashboard examples. Basically, you configure the dashboard with the nodes that you have the way that you want them. Not that big of a deal. So you load the dashboard. It gives you some set of nodes. You can load more dashboard nodes from the internet if they don't. If the ones that you load by default are not working for you, many people on the internet through GitHub, through the repository, have configured a ton of dashboard nodes. So I'm just going to go through some dashboard examples here to give your mind juices working here on what you can do and what you can't do. Some of the stuff you can program is not necessarily just command and control. You can load an image. Here's the propagation map. It updates every hour. Here's a geochron that you can put in your dashboard. Here's weather that you can put in your dashboard. Here's a flow that I wrote for Missouri QSO Party that basically takes all of the different loggers that we were kind of looking for spots and whatnot, and it collects them all into one cluster node, and then I was serving out a telnet for all of the clusters, combining all the clusters together. So that's something you can do in Node-RED. It has POTA spots down here, so we were hunting POTA too on Missouri QSO Party. So here is a dashboard example. So this WebLoggers Digital Pro switch is probably, if you're going to get started, probably one of the first things you should probably buy to get started on a basic level. This thing's got 8 switchable AC receptacles and 2 that are always on. It runs on the network. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got Ethernet. This thing is awesome. It's about $150, and you can control it with Node-RED. So this is the flow. So you basically, it starts the flow, probably pulls it every second, does a curl status, which this thing runs Linux, and gets the status of all of the ports here on if they're on and off. These right here are dashboard nodes. So it's got Flex 1, PS Outlet 1, miscellaneous PS Outlet 2. So you can rename these, and these are all your dashboard nodes. So these are switches, and then it goes back into the device and switches the device on and off based on if you switch each receptacle on and off. So this is an example of what that dashboard node looks like. These don't really line up because I kind of stole the flow and then stole the dashboard. But this is what it basically looks like. So port 1 might be your Dell PC, your port 2 might be your fiber router, a Netgear switch, a Raspberry Pi, a backup, a camera that is connected PoE, and then maybe the flex power supply and a miscellaneous power supply. So these are all, you click on these and they turn red or green based on if they're on or off. Here's another handy device, this KMT or KMtronics web relay. I've got the wrong picture here, but it serves the same purpose. Basically, this device is Ethernet based, takes 12 volts in, and you can control every one of these relays, these 8 relays, through Node-RED. It's basically just a switch. Turn it on, turn it off. So if you needed a relay in your shack, this would be a good option. Also, there's some temperature or some status and control that you can do on a Raspberry Pi. So all of these right here are exec nodes, which basically means you can run something from the command prompt on a Raspberry Pi. So you can see here these CPU temperatures, the CPU, memory use, disk space, all of these reboot, shutdown, all of these green nodes are dashboard nodes, and they correspond to either a gauge or a chart or a button here on these devices, or I'm sorry, on this dashboard here. Another thing you can do is you can map cluster or spots on a map, or maybe contacts. I'm going to show you all my dashboard where I've done both of these, but it's got a mapping feature within Node-RED, which is really cool. So what is a node? So basically a node is the building block of a flow, and a flow flows into a dashboard and then displays something on the dashboard. So here is some typical nodes that are loaded by default, and I'm going to show you the interface on this, on what these things mean and what they do. Each node, whenever you drag it over to the configuration page or the programming page, you double click on it and it brings up a configuration, and you can change the parameters in each of the configuration. So this inject node, you can inject like a timestamp or a string or a number or something along those lines. And typically this is what gets the flow started. Message payload, this is a debug node. So debug nodes are your friend, right? Put debug nodes on everything to see what's coming out of the flow or coming out of a node. And you can configure this at will. Your default payload, your default information that you're passing from node to node, and it's doing, each node is doing a little bit of work on that string, that number, that whatever you're passing, that is called message.payload. It's the default payload of what you're passing from node to node. This switch node here is just basically a big if then else statement. If we're saying if message payload and this double equals in the programming world means equals, if it equals, let's say, a string of hi, go out port number 1. And as you add different values here and different statements for it to check, it'll add more and more of these little noggins over here on the right-hand side, and I'll show you a little bit of that. So each node has got an input or and or an output. So the inject only has a output. The message payload only has an input. So outputs are on the right-hand side, inputs are on the left-hand side. So this is a sample flow, and I just kind of put this together, and this is what, whenever you put nodes together into flows, this is how things flow from left to right. So we're going to start on the left-hand side, and that inject node is going to trigger that flow every minute. And you can configure that to say, all right, on every, at the top of every minute, we're going to start this flow, and it's going to start the flow. The second node there is an HTTP request. So there is a default node that you can go and get some information from a website, let's say, and you can configure this node. So we're going to go and get some data on a website, and that data is going to be temperature information. We're going to pass it to a conversion node that we got off the internet, that we loaded off the internet, that converts Celsius to Fahrenheit very easily. So you pass it a number in Celsius, out the right-hand side comes that number in Fahrenheit. Okay. So then we're going to bring it into a switch node right here, and we're going to say if the degrees equals 100 degrees Fahrenheit, go ahead and pass it. If it doesn't equal 100 degrees Fahrenheit, don't do anything. The flow is going to stop. And then in 1 minute, it's going to restart and go get that data, convert it to C to Fahrenheit, and see if it's 100 degrees. If the data equals 100 degrees, we're going to change that message payload to running hot, a string called running hot. And then we're going to display that in that, this right here is a data or a table that we can put like maybe a timestamp and the string that we just passed running hot, and we can display that in a table. We can also shoot that out to a device that's listening on port 7300, because this is a TCP out port. So we could pass that to a device that's running on 7300. And here are all the debug nodes that you can put. So all of these are connected through these lines. So you can see all of them are connected right here. And you can put debugs on all these nodes. And whenever you turn them on, it's going to show in the debug plane what is being passed from the request to this node, and it's going to show up with in this payload or this debug node. So you can basically easily show or see what's going on with your flows by just putting some debug nodes on them. So here is what the debug node looks like. This is the pane on the left-hand or the right-hand side, and I'm going to show you this later, but this is some debug information that you can kind of drill down and see what's being passed. So where to start? Node-RED.org. That's where you start. It's got a ton of great information out there that you can get started on. Again, Raspberry Pi is probably the easiest way because it's got the most documentation. It's got one script to install. After you get the Raspberry Pi up and running, you run one command and it automatically installs. It's really easy. So installing Node-RED for Windows, if you decide to do Windows, and you can install it, there is a page to go through. You got to install Node.js, and then you run it from a command prompt, and you got to make sure that it's always running. We've heard and have stories on the mailing list that people think that it's running in the background, and they go and Windows has shut it down. So be careful if you're running on Windows. It's got a lot of quirks. Here's the documentation for the Raspberry Pi. You basically type in this bash command, and it installs for you. I wrote this PowerPoint whenever Raspberry Pis were where you could get Raspberry Pis. Now it's kind of hard to get Raspberry Pis. You can still get them, but it's a little tough. Got to skip this. This is enabling SSH and Wi-Fi on the Raspberry Pi on the first boot. You guys that are recording this can pause this and take a look. But all this stuff is on my YouTube channel and on the documentation. So this is one of the things that gets people hung up the most is, all right, I just loaded Raspberry, or I just loaded Node-RED. What's next? What do I do? How do I get to stuff? Here's the down and dirty. So whenever you load Node-RED on a Raspberry Pi, it installs its own web server. So you go and point your browser on your computer, any computer, a Linux, a Mac, a Windows. You're going to bring up a website on that Raspberry Pi. Typically, if you're on the Raspberry Pi, it's localhost.1880. If you boot into X Windows or KDE or some GUI interface. If not, and you're on another computer, it's the IP of the Raspberry Pi :1880 is going to get you into the workspace, and that is over here on the left-hand side. That's where you do all your programming, okay? Your dashboard, after you compile your program and get it up and running, your dashboard is located at the localhost.1880/UI. It's very important. People are like, well, okay, where's my dashboard? /UI is where your dashboard is at, or the Raspberry Pi address, :1880/UI. And that will bring up the dashboard. Okay. Here's the main interface screen. So over here on the left-hand side, you've got your palette. This is where your nodes are located at. After you get, there's the default nodes that load. You can load nodes from the internet. You can load, you can side load nodes. Anything that you load that is a node that you load manually will show up here in the palette. Okay. Here's the workspace. Here's where your flows are constructed. You have different tabs that you can put along the top to keep your flows organized. And then over here is your sidebar. This is where your debug, your information, any information about the nodes. This is where you upload to GitHub. This is where your database stuff is located at. So all of your information is over here in your sidebar. And then your very important deploy button. So after you've created a node, after you've created a flow, you have to hit the deploy button in order to deploy that node or that flow, and then configure, or then it configures the dashboard, and it's basically the big compile button, right? One of the first things that people do not do after they load Node-RED is they don't load the dashboard. So after, this is an advice tip, after you get Node-RED up and running, the first thing you need to do is come to the hamburger menu, which is in the upper right-hand corner, and come down here to Manage Palette. It's going to bring up another window. You're going to click on Install, and you're going to come down here to Node-RED-Dashboard. If you search for Dashboard here under the magnifying glass, it's going to come up. It's going to be the second or third one, and you're going to install it. Click Install. It's going to install all your dashboard nodes, and you're going to hit OK. That's probably the one biggest mistake people don't do after they load Node-RED for the first time. Where's all my dashboard nodes? Well, you got to manually load them. So just a tip to the wise here. Resources. So there's a ton of good stuff out there. Node-RED.org is your first stop to go get some more information. Node-RED on YouTube, they've got their own YouTube channel. You might want to go out and take a look at this, or take a look at that YouTube channel. Opto Video, it is an industrial automation type channel, but they've got a lot of really good stuff about Node-RED. There's also Node-RED on Reddit, but the holy grail of them all is there is a groups IO that's dedicated to Node-RED for ham radio. It's over 1,500 members, and we talk about Node-RED in the groups IO all day. There are, I don't know how many topics there are or how many email strings there are, but there's quite a few. Everything from how do I get started to more advanced programming. So it's the groups.io/G Node-RED-ham radio. If you just type in Node-RED for ham radio groups.io, it's the first one that's going to come up. So if you're interested, I would suggest you go and join that. This is what the groups.io, and if you click on files, there are all of the files that people have uploaded, their flows for Flex, Tuner Genius, ICOM, Yaesu, rotors, amplifiers. They're all there. All you have to do is search for your amplifier, your rotator, whatever in the search field. The JSON file will pop up probably, and then you just load that, do an import into Node-RED, and it will import the flow, and you just there might be some notes associated with that. Do some configuration. Hopefully, it'll bring you up and get you up and running. Some more advanced stuff. Join the groups.io, install Node-RED. Start small. Bring over some nodes. Start playing around with some flows, connecting things together. No one says that you have to jump into the deep end and you got to run. So my advice is go slow, crawl, walk, run, get familiar with the interface, get familiar on how to compile stuff. I'm going to show you some dashboards, tricks, and tips here. Get familiar with that on lining things up, and then start loading a flow for your amplifier or your rotator or whatnot. So that's what I would suggest you do. Here's my YouTube channel. I've got some Node-RED, like I said, a lot of videos out there on Node-RED. Just go and click and subscribe. I usually do something on Node-RED about once a month. So that's it for that. Let me go to some dashboard fundamentals here. So we have already seen some of this. So I've got an installed Node-RED video that you can take a look at. So what is the dashboard? So this is the dashboard, right? Things are grouped by tabs. So this hamburger menu in the upper left-hand corner, you can configure different tabs. So that would be a new screen, okay? These boxes are called groups. And then inside each group is a dashboard node. So I've got the Raspberry Pi status and control group. I've got the power switch group, flex group, web relay group, network status group, weather at E-layer, solar group, and all of these groups are under the tab called E-layer command and control. Okay, that's going to be important. We talked about the first to do, loading the dashboard. So where's the dashboard configs? People are just like, well, okay, I've got these flows. How do I configure my dashboard? This sidebar, remember the sidebar that I talked about in a previous slide here? There's different tabs up here at the very top. If you click the one that looks like a bar graph, that is your dashboard. Whenever you click on that, you're going to get a different sidebar, and this is where you're going to be able to configure your dashboard and the way that your dashboard looks like. If you don't get that, there's a down arrow, and it will have all of the tabs here that you can choose from. You can just go down here and click on dashboard. Okay. Talked about where the dashboard is located. It's at /UI. So here is all the dashboard nodes. They're all in teal, green, whatever color that is if you're colorblind. So all of your dashboard nodes are here. Okay. If you want to display data on a dashboard node, it usually goes at the end of a flow or to the left of, to the right of some node that is doing some work that you want to display, right? Because typically you're going to have an input that comes into a dashboard node. Sometimes it has an output, but I wouldn't get into the semantics of that. Things get pushed into the dashboard node to be displayed. Okay. So here is a typical gauge node. So there's a dashboard node that says gauge. Here it is down over here. And whenever you drag this over, it's got some properties. So you can give it a label. Well, this is the group. Remember, I talked about the groups that you can place them in. So I placed this in the Raspberry Pi status. You can't see it, but it's a Raspberry Pi status group. The size, you can make the size bigger or smaller based on, this is a 3x3. It's a type gauge. There's different types of gauges. You can give it a label, CPU temperature, and that shows up at the top. The value, that's whatever it's in that mustache configuration, that just means the default value that comes in for message payload. That's what we're going to display. Units in Fahrenheit, and then a minimum and a maximum. So the minimum is going to be green. I'm sorry, a minimum and maximum. So that's just the max value. But this color gradient, you can put whatever is green, whatever is yellow and red. So 0 to 125 is green, 126 to 149 is yellow, 150 to 170 is red. So this will change color whenever it gets to those values. And then this name is the CPU temp. This is just the label that gets put on the configuration screen, so you can figure out what it is. There's also these lights. So you come down here. Remember, we talked about message payload as the default. So if message payload says red, say make the color of the light red. If it's yellow, make it yellow. If it's green, make it green. So very logical things to make the dashboard pretty and functional. We talked about groups and tabs over here. This is how you put things in groups. So you can see over here, my main tab here, E-layer command and control. Here is my tab, E-layer command and control. Here are my groups, Raspberry Pi, status and control. And you can see some nesting going on here. Power switch miscellaneous, flex power, web relay. That all lines up here with all of these groups. If I would click on this down arrow in these groups, you would see the actual dashboard nodes show up. So that's how you put all of these things. You group all of the dashboard nodes into a group, which then go into a tab. And you can have many, into a tab. And you can have many tabs. So I've got radio B, shack control, DX cluster, FR stack, slices, camera feed. Those are all different tabs. If I clicked on this hamburger menu over here, you would see that drop down arrow with all of these tabs that I could select. Okay. We've already talked about that. The tabs, E-layer command and control. Same stuff. Again, here's where the tab drop down looks like. So here's E-layer command and control. That is one tab. Radio B shack control, that's another tab. DX cluster, that's another tab. So this is the nesting of the dashboard groups. So I've got a gauge that is called random number gauge. I think I spelt that wrong. I did. And so then this dashboard node comes over the random numbers group, which is under the random, I think I spelled that wrong too. Jeez. The tab over here, and it's probably 3 a.m. I was doing this slide, so who knows? So anyway, dashboard nodes go under these groups, which go under tabs. Just wanted to show that. A little redundancy, some more advanced stuff that doesn't pertain. So basically, you can, whenever you want to create a new tab or create a new group, you can come over here and these. Whenever you hover over the dashboard sidebar, you get these different buttons over here, and you can create more groups. You can create more tabs. So it's very easy to create and delete what you need. So this is kind of the brunt of how you put all of your dashboard nodes in the order that you want it to look like. So I'm gonna come through here. So this is the widget. or the what you see, what you get interface. So if you remember, I had, if you come back over here, so I had these groups here, Raspberry Pi, status control, and you can see CPU temperature, memory used, disk space, CPU. I had a graph here, and then 2 buttons down at the bottom. If I scroll over here and take a look at the sheet here that you can configure these, you can see I've got the CPU temperature. Looks like my IP address is not showing up, but then I've got another gauge, the chart, and then reboot and shutdown. So you can configure and size all of these dashboard nodes inside of that group, and you can put them wherever you want by just dragging and dropping. Same thing with the power switch on and off, web relay, network status, the weather group that I had. So all of this stuff is configurable by just dragging and dropping and resizing however you want. Now, so here's a visual indication of how these things are laid out. So here's CPU temperature, here's memory used, here's a hidden node that I didn't use, so you can hide nodes so they don't show up. Disk space, CPU temperature, so there's that chart. Here's that reboot button and the shutdown. Same thing with the layer or the weather over here. So we've got the weather. This is a text, so it's showing clouds. Weather details is another text box. Wind direction is a 360 gauge. Wind speed is just a regular gauge. Outside temp is a text. Here's a chart. And then here's an LED that shows if there's a warning or not. And then here's a switch. So I can shut down my station if this weather details says thunder. All right, let's see. Let's go to, I don't know if you guys, can you see that? Is it pretty small? Might be a little small here.
A little small, but I can see it.
Yeah, yeah. So here is my contesting dashboard that I'm going to show you guys. But here are, nodes and flows can be very easy and very complex. So this is just one tab of the contesting dashboard that I've put together. Most of your flows that you load and configure for your shack are not this complex, but you can see that it's got different tabs up here. So if I click on the different tabs, the different flows, and you can have many flows within a tab that start and stop. That's just the way that you want to configure them. And then here's my palette over here with all of my nodes that you can load. Okay. And then here's the sidecar or the sidebar here. So this is my dashboard. Here's my debug panel. Here's some just configuration. For you programmers out there, this is where you declare your node variables, flow variables, global variables, if you have any. So if I click on here, I've got some global variables here that I've configured. So let's get into, let's see. Some other things that I wanted to show you guys is stuff that you can use in your shack. I don't know if anybody has heard of Elgato, but Elgato is a company that makes devices to help 14-year-old kids stream and gaming things. Well, we have migrated that 14-year-old mentality over to ham radio and have configured them to do different things in your shack. This Elgato Stream Deck is awesome. I've got one right here that you can see. It's a this is a 15 button, and all of those buttons that you see are all LEDs, little LEDs, and you can configure all of those buttons to do something, right? It's a hotkey. Well, you can also make it communicate with Node-RED to do a bunch of things, right? It doesn't have to just do one thing. It can do a bunch of things, right? So, and you can have layers and layers and layers of different pages on the Stream Deck. So it's not just limited to 15 buttons. And here is some of the buttons that people have configured. So, you know, you can control your rotator here. You can put different symbols or different words in here. You can turn things on and off. You can bring N1mm in focus or not. It's all configurable. It saves you a ton of time and energy if you can just hit that Stream Deck and click one button to do a bunch of different stuff. Another cool thing that they just came out with is this foot pedal. And this foot pedal plugs into USB, and you can configure it. It's got 3 foot pedals. So for those of you who do single sideband contesting, you can maybe put the middle pedal as your push to talk, and then maybe your left and your right can to keep your hands or your fingers on the home rows to toggle entry window focus and transmit focus if you're doing SO2R, so you never have to literally go up and hit your pause key or your break key or your tilde key or whatever you have configured for your SO2R configuration. You can do this by your foot pedal. That can all be automated in Node-RED and talking to N1mm. So I got about 13 minutes here. Any questions so far? I want to showcase my contesting dashboard here.
Just one quick question in terms of if the devices got in and out, but like from the old legacy amps, tube amps and stuff that are not automatic, those really cannot be controlled then.
Correct. Correct. You have to have some type of interface to get things in and out. Now, people have taken those tube amps and automated them by literally ripping the guts out and putting new guts in. But that is on the extreme.
Yeah.
Typically, if you get an Elecraft, an Expert, a Flex, if it's got an input or output and has got some basically buttons instead of knobs that you have to actually tune, you can probably automate it.
All right, cool.
So another thing that I wanted to bring up, so you're probably thinking, well, how do I automate your power supply? Well, you plug your power supply into one of those digital loggers AC switch, and you just turn the power on, and you control the power the power supply through your AC outlet. That's how you control that. These antenna disconnects are awesome. Paradan antenna disconnects. You apply 12 volts, it latches the antenna, and it's got a lightning arrestor in it. Now, I wouldn't trust it with your regular lightning arrestor because by the world of Ward Silver, you need to lightning protect everything per his grounding and bonding book. But if you need something to disconnect and connect antennas, this thing is awesome. I've got many of them in my contest station, and you apply 12 volts, it connects your antenna. You disconnect, and it unconnects your antenna. If you got RS-232 and you want to convert it to Ethernet, these USR in 540s are cheap and really good. We use those. So basically, anything that you can get input or output out of, you can connect it to your Raspberry Pi and control it here. Let's see. What else? What else? So yeah, so that's about it for Node-RED. So my contesting dashboard, so it can work with N1MM, TR4W, RUMLog, and DXlog. Depends on what you want to do with it. The guys at the DXlog are very slow to adapt anything new. So we've asked them, and they're like, "Oh, well, whenever we get around to it, we'll figure it out." So this dashboard was born out of whenever I go down and do multi-ops at Ward N0AX. He lives in St. Charles, which is about 30 minutes away. His contest station's about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from here. He hosts a lot of multi-ops, and I was tired of always being in the radio room and hovering over somebody that is at the radio with an N1MM, score window up, seeing where we were at. And the online scoreboards kind of solved that, where we could just put a computer out in the middle of the area, the common area. But you're just kind of looking at numbers. You're not really interfacing or knowing what's going on with the contest. You don't know what's going on locally with your contest station. You don't know who's contacting who, what the run rate is, unless you've got another station there. But it's not very pretty, and it doesn't give a lot of information that I like to look at with real-time stats and reports. So I went down this road of programming, taking all of the UDP information that you can get out of N1M and stick it in a Node-RED. And I knew I was onto something whenever I programmed this late last year, and we went down to sweepstakes, and I brought this up and put it on a screen in the common area, actually in the kitchen of Ward's contesting station. And Ward had pulled the lazy boy out of the living room and was in the kitchen with his feet propped up, and he was staring at this contest dashboard eating popcorn whenever I got done contesting. And I go, "Ward, what are you doing?" He goes, "This thing's great. I could watch this all day." So I think I was onto something whenever he was, and then he fell asleep in front of it. So I don't know how to take that, but I decided to take it a step forward, or a step further. So this is what your multi-op looks like, with everyone hovering over trying to figure out what the score is, right? So why not put together something that is a lot more, looks like, eye candy, and gives you a lot more information that you can kind of do something with. So how does this thing work? Well, takes all the information from your contest app, puts it into a Node-RED server that runs SQLite, that you might have running on a Raspberry Pi or a computer, and then you've got to have another computer to display that information. You can run these together. If you do, it probably needs to be on a computer that's running Ubuntu, or a Pi 4 that's got some power. But you can get a big screen television and easily put together some type of digital signage that you've got 4 dashboard tabs, like I showed you in the slides before, going at one time to display a ton of information about the contest. So how does this work? You go into N1MM broadcast data, and you point all of the radio, the contacts, the score, and the external call sign lookup data to your Raspberry Pi, or your device that you're running your contest dashboard on. It's going to send out UDP packets. So every time you make a contact, it's going to send out a UDP packet with all of that contact information. I take it into the dashboard, I parse it, and I put it into a database, and then I display it on the contest dashboard. So, yeah, so here is, sorry guys, I'm not in presentation mode. So this is typical flow on how I insert things into the database, and then after they're into the database, then I can do a bunch of work on it. So I can do stats and pull all that stuff out and display it on the dashboard. So here is the the main screen. So it's got your last QSOs and time between last QSOs over here. It's got your last QSO that was made. So KK1L was made on 40 meters, single sideband. Exchange was Ron in Vermont. The distance for my QTH was 1,052 miles, the op. And then it also, as contacts QSO, logged QSOs come in, they get mapped, and we draw great circle lines on here, and you can configure the time to live on here on what you want. And as you know, as the time to live expires, then these things drop off and more QSOs get populated. Here's the contest stats. So your total score, the amount of QSOs, the mults, points, current QSO rate. So that's the combined QSO rate of your multi-op or your single op or whatever you've got this configured for. If you've got it configured for multi-op, it gives the longest QSO. I've reconfigured this to say farthest QSO. That was done today. And then just gives some multi per hour. Same stuff that you get out of N1MM, but I just calculate it manually through the database. And then here's some graphs. So QSOs by band, you can see it's got 20 meters here. So we've done about 30 QSOs, but as you work more bands, it'll show you how many QSOs by band, QSO rate by band. So each band will show up here with a different QSO rate. Total QSO rate, so this is the total for the multi-op or single op if you got it configured. And then the spot rate, once you connect to a telnet server, it's going to show you how many spots are coming in. That kind of can give you any indication of how hot the bands are at. And then down here are your first two radios. It gives information on who the operator is, what mode, what frequency, their status, their macro that they type in, so it'll tell you what macro they're sending. The radio QSO, or basically the operator on their QSO rate, and then if they're in transmit or if they the radio is in focus. More info screen on the radio, so it'll list all the radios and who's operating, the mode, the frequency, the status, the op rate for the or the QSO rate for the op, and then also the QSO rate for the band, and then it'll graph the QSO rate per band for 1 hour and 2 hours. So that's is in real time. This op competition screen. So I've put a lot of time and effort into this. So whenever you're running a multi-op, there's not a lot of competition in your multi-op, right? There's competition on station by station, right? You're competing with people across the world, across the United States, whatever the region is, and also in your category. But there is no competition within operators within your multi-op. So I created a game that tracks all that information and puts pins operators against other operators within the multi-op. So you can see I had this running down here on WV4P station. So what it does is it just does a bunch of database queries and puts these people in order based on score or QSO, and all of that is configurable. So WV4P is in first. He's got 267 QSOs, 177 multis. Busted is based on QRZ lookup. If it can't find an QRZ, it just assumes that it's a busted call, but this is not by, obviously, you got to submit your log to figure out if it's a busted call. Run QSOs, so it's totally tallies up all the run QSOs. Your 1 hour run rate, your 2 hour run rate, and then it has some trending over here. So you can see that WV4P is probably on the radio right now because his run rate is going up in both 1 hour and 2 hours. So he's got an overall of going up. VE5MX, he might have taken a break. So his run rate is coming down. WK9M, he might be running, but he's not making any QSOs. So just some overall trending so you can kind of see who's doing well and who's not doing well. And then more graphs over here on operators, 1 hour queues, 2 hour queues, operator QSOs, and then operator score just graphs it by operator. Forgot to tell you up here in this banner bar, we've got, and this is on all of the banners, it's got a lightning detector, so it tells you how close the lightning is. And then here, I'm in the process of redoing this because the online scoreboard guys have given me a little bit more information and access to the scores, but you could chase different stations and it would update automatically whenever contest scoreboard updates. It would put their score up here, so you can, at one glance, you can tell where your competitors are at, and these are programmable, so you can put those in manually if you want to chase some of your friends. SFI, A and K index, and then your time over here. This is your contest scoreboard. I'm in the process of redoing this because they gave me more access to their API, but you can see we've got K9CT. This is the contest call that we're using, 12 million points. ND7K got 14 points, so he is 2,200,000 ahead. Anything in below is in red, so we're looking for more red versus green. So this is, just inputting all your friends and chasing your friends through the online scoreboard. This is more contesting 2.0. In the ARL, they just announced that unlimited category, and you can stream. So I'm working on a screen that you can basically stream to Twitch or YouTube to get more kids, more people interested in contesting. If you go to my YouTube channel, I use this to stream with, and it basically puts context on the map. It shows you who you're working through that lookup, the lookup through N1MM. So whenever you put a call in the entry window, it'll pop up over here to see who I'm working, and then who I just worked, and then you can put different things like your chat box, your webcam, maybe your PAN adapter down here. So it's just a template. This is a real-time beaconing, RBN mapping. So you CQers are your CW guys and digital guys. Whenever you call a CQ, this is going to show up to see where you're being heard. So you can click on this screen to just to have a visual map of where you're being heard across North America or across the world. Raspberry Pi monitor, just to monitor the status of the Raspberry Pi. I think everyone has seen that. This is the configuration screen. So before every contest, you come in here and you configure all of these parameters for each contest, and that will determine what you see on the dashboard. This looks daunting, but it's actually pretty simple. Once you get this set up once, you really don't need to mess with it. Unless you have, or a couple of these parameters you have to, but there is a save button, so you can back up the configuration. The issue with this is if you reboot the Pi or you start Node-RED as a service, it will lose its configuration. So that's why I created the backup and restore. So you hit the backup, it backs it up, hit the restore after you reboot the Pi, it brings it back, all these fields populate again, and you're back up and running. So my future high level here, and I'm working with the contest online scoreboard guys, is to take all the parameters and all of the things that I have gathered and bring them up all into a master database website that someone can go to, kind of like what they did for WRTC, that you can kind of see what's going on and see things in real time versus just the score. Why can't we just do more visual stuff versus just seeing what people are putting on a scoreboard versus what are they actually looking at, what's going on in their station. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do to make it pretty and make it more interesting versus just taking a look at a score in real time. How to download the dashboard. If you go to GitHub and type in contesting dashboard, it's all there. It's all on GitHub. It's totally free. I do ask before you start to install, read the install.md file. That's going to, I put a lot of time and effort into that document on how to install this. So read that all the way through before you get started. And also, I'm looking for some help. Like I said, I'm not a programmer, but I have all of these visions and things that I like to do, but I just don't have the knowledge and the know-how to do them. So if you have any, if you know anybody or you know anything in the GIS world in JavaScript, like shapefiles, leaflet, CSS, I'd love to talk to you and bounce some ideas off you, because I'd like to take this thing to the next level. Another thing I'm working on that I just don't know how to do, that I need some help with, is maybe this chloropleth map. So we've all seen this map before in political political maps. I would love to be able to do exactly this. You know, Montana, you know, you've got 3 contacts. In South Dakota, you got 3. In Missouri, you've got 10. Illinois, you got 20, and turn the different regions to different shades of a color based on the amount of contacts that you've made in that region, that grid, that state, ARL section. I'd love to do something like that, but again, just time, effort, and knowledge is not on my side. More contesting online scoreboard integration. I met with those guys at Dayton, and we had a good chat. We're probably going to do a little bit more together, but it's slow going, and that is it. And here is the dashboard here. If you have any questions about the dashboard, this map is configurable. Here are the different, here's the op competition, and here's the radio. Obviously doesn't have any information in it, but this is the blank template that would probably you'd see whenever you you load it for the first time. And here's the configuration screen. Looks a little different than my screenshots that I had a couple of months ago, because I've done some work on it. But so this is how you configure everything for the dash, or for the main screens that I just showed you. So that is it. 10:07, 7 minutes over.
You did good.
The gist of it is start slow. People jump into the deep end at first, and they get over their head, and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. And they, you know, people help them at the groups IO, but you can clearly see that they're over their head and they're asking questions. If they just started slow and built on their knowledge, they wouldn't be asking the questions that they ask, because a lot of people, you know, they're just lazy, and they just, I just want it to work. I want it to load and work. Well, in the Node-RED world, it can be that simple, but sometimes it's not. So you kind of have to just start slow.
So that's good. I love the way these dashboards look, especially when you're tracking some of the competition. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, I would love for, you know, there's a lot of work to be done in the multi-op competition between competitors within the multi-op. And I would love to see where not only are you reporting your score for your station, but why can't we have competition, an individual competition between competitors, between stations, and all of that information gets aggregated into one where, you know, you can have not only a station score, but you can have an individual score in a contest, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could have, you know, different parameters, like, you know, the furthest QSO, or the highest queues per hour, or, you know, there's a whole plethora of things that you can, you know, make a competition on, that you can razz, you know, your friends because I like multi-ops, but you only submit one score, right? Why can't I have an individual score in a multi-op, you know, and use that for, you know, to compete with other people?
Right. No,
So
I like that. I like that idea.
it's the execution that's hard. It's the idea is easy. The execution is a little harder, but I'm working through the details. It's just give me a little more time.
Oh, no problem. Anybody have any questions?
Let's see.
Well, I loaded your contest dashboard,
Yeah.
and I really like it. Now I have to do the update to the newer version from your GitHub, but it's loaded as they're called projects, aren't they?
Yeah, correct. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's loaded as a project, so I'll update it now and see the changes that you made.
Yeah, I updated it for. I didn't get enough time. I wanted to put together a field day screen that was just dedicated to field day, so clubs could use it. I ran out of time, and but I have the screen vision in my head on what the screen looks like, because you know, whenever it's great that you can use it as field day today. That's not a problem. But I'm thinking that, you know, you would have this up at field day, and you have a public field day, and someone who has no idea about ham radio, and you've got a bunch of people in the park that have got, you know, antennas in the air. Somebody walks over and says, "What's going on here?" It's very hard to tell a new ham or somebody that doesn't know anything about amateur radio what is going on in the radio, unless you can, you know, you can point to the radio and say, oh, they're talking to, you know, Cuba, or they're talking to Spain, or they're talking to Florida, or whatever the case may be. It's another thing whenever you can come over to like some type of dashboard and you can actually see the contact being made. You can hear them and then see the contact actually being made on the screen, and the line being drawn, and the contact being logged. And then it gets to the point where it gets real, right? Oh, they just got that exchange from somebody in Florida. Oh, and that's the line. Oh, it's down there by Miami. Is that who they talked to? Yeah, that's oh, and then they just talked to somebody in Washington. Oh, okay, cool. And now, you know, it becomes a little bit more real whenever you can visually see what's kind of going on versus just talking about it.
That would be cool.
Yeah. I just didn't get enough time. I
Yeah.
had it on my radar, and but the map is there. It's just it's not in the. I had a lot more visions of what it was going to look like. So we'll tackle it next year.
Well, we appreciate it, Kyle. You taking the time. Hopefully, they can keep you up past your bedtime.
No. I actually I had to tell you the truth, I'm glad that this happened at this time, because a water main just busted outside of my house in the intersection, and
Oh, no.
they turned off the water starting at 8:30, and they said that it was going to be turned on about 11. So I've got 45 more minutes until the water's turned on. So this was a good thing to occupy my time so I wasn't thinking about, oh, is my water back on? So
Don't get it. Well, what we'll do is once we get the recording done and posted, I'll send you the link of where
Okay.
it's at, so you have it as a reference.
yeah, and if any of your members have questions or anything about the Node-RED, or how to get configured, how to configure stuff, or you know, whatever, have them drop me an email. I'm hanging out on that groups IO all the time. I'd be more than happy to, you know, do a Zoom with them to you know, answer questions, or you know, figure out what's going on with their Node-RED, you know, problems. Sometimes it's a lot easier to just get on a Zoom and have a 20-minute conversation versus 200 emails back and forth.
Yeah, now, this was good because I've heard of Raspberry Pi and heard of Node-RED, but I have no practical experience with any of it. But I'm, my own future station, I'm looking to do more automation and more control stuff without, cutting down on cables and wires and everything else so that I can do to simplify it, but also make it easy to use. So,
Yeah. It has no, unless it becomes easier on your life, what's the point in doing it? Right.
right.
And there's a lot of people that struggle with Node-RED because, I can't get it to do what I want it to do, or this or that. And I'm going to tell you, unless you take the pre-configured nodes or the pre-configured flows and load them and just be done with it, I guarantee you, once you go down that rabbit hole and you start to tinker, you're going to tinker for the rest of your life on it, because that's just the way that it is. And it becomes like this, and you learn something and go, oh, well, now I know how to do this. And now, I can take that and apply it to this. Well, this is what I've been trying to do for the last 6 months on Node-RED. Now I know how to do it. So it's like this, or somebody will put something in the group's IO and have explain something, and a light bulb will go off and be like, that's what I needed to complete the puzzle on my, dashboard.
Outstanding.
It's fun. It is, like I said, I'm not a programmer, but I've had a blast the last year and a half, 2 years putting together dashboards and whatnot, because you're always tinkering with it.
Obviously, you've learned a lot just by going through all the motions.
Yeah, and you know what? It's you wouldn't believe how much I've forgotten too. You learn something, and my friend is a C++ programmer, and I said, I don't understand how you keep all this stuff straight whenever you go through a million lines of code. And he goes, it's called Google. And I said, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one, because every time I want to do something new, I just Google it, and then it goes in one ear and right out the other. And then if I have to go back and troubleshoot it, I have to relearn it. He goes, that's the life of a programmer.
Sounds like one.
Well,
But I
I've
hope the
seen
water gets turned back on. Go ahead, Bob.
I've seen several presentations on Node-RED, and they all start the same way you did, of it's easy, but then at the very end I was confused. So the way you described it, I joined the group's IO while you were talking, and I commend you for the way you explained it, made it logical. I feel like I'm going to give it a try at this point.
Yeah, thanks. I know, Virgil. I've seen some of those Node-RED presentations, and I'm even confused after I've viewed them. So I've tried to break it down to the point where, get your flows together, right? Start slow, right? Get your flows together, get them compiled, and then do your dashboard nodes. And if you go back and watch some of my YouTube series and whatnot, all of that stuff is configurable, but you have to, if you jump into it and think, okay, this is too overwhelming, you're going to get overwhelmed, and try and tackle too much, you're going to get overwhelmed real fast, right? So start slow with your flows, get all of that stuff, and then start on your dashboards and configure your dashboards with that what you see, what you get editor, and start moving stuff, and just start with a couple of nodes or a couple of dashboard nodes and configure them in a dashboard and make them, order them in different orders, put them side by side, put some spacers in there. And once you get the gist of it, then you'll be like, I got this. I can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'll get quite a few requests for where the recording is. So we'll get that done.
Yep.
And thank you again. This was enlightening to me, because I knew very little about it. Now I know enough to get myself dangerous.
Right. Right. Yep. I hear you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Kyle.
Yeah. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Yep.
Cool.
Enjoy your evening, and I'll
Yep.
be back in touch.
Okay. Very good. 73. Hope to work you guys on the air.
73.
And good luck with the water.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Good night.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.